Do you have, are you Irish at all?
I think like maybe 25%.
Okay.
And I just can't bring myself to do the 23andMe. Like, I'm not going to spend money to let me know, oh, by the way, you're Egyptian.
Yeah, I know that most of me is Irish, English, and French Canadian, and I'm happy with that.
And honestly, there was a rumor a couple years ago that Monteleone is actually a French name. So I'm like, I can't be having an identity crisis at this point in my life, realizing like, oh, by the way, you're French.
But hey, you want to kick this sucker off?
Kidoki. Here we go. Welcome, boys and girls, to yet another fantastic episode of the Sanctum Sanctorum Podcast, where comics and Christ culture collide. I am host Joey.
And I am host Chris. Is that like a title now?
Yep.
Not your host or the host, just host.
A host. Lay host.
A host is a host of Coast of Coast.
I like that. We're excited that you're with us today as we are on episode 14, covering one of comics' most interesting movies.
It's certainly of all the movies I've ever seen, this is one of them.
You nailed that. That was great. Before we get into said movie, thank you so much for listening and for liking and subscribing and all the things you guys do on social media. We're just giving a shout out to the fans. Thank you so much for making this community what it is. If you're not already subscribed, if you have not started following us and liking some of the content on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of that, that's where you can find us. And so just a quick shout out to all of you who have made this community so great. Thank you so much and keep going. We do it for you. We do it for ourselves, but we do it for you.
We do it for ourselves, but we love when you also want to be a part of it because it makes us feel like we're not just having super fancy phone conversations.
We like when you affirm our desire. Therefore, host Chris, you got a comic culture moment for us?
I do. So we didn't actually say what movie we're covering, but it'll be.
And we're not gonna.
Oh, we're not gonna. Well, what we're doing is a movie that involves a team up of various characters coming together for a common goal. Now, there's a lot of those. It
rhymes with Spieg of Extraordinary Spendelman.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for host Joey's behavior just now. We're going to edit that out so you won't even see it.
Don't apologize. They'll hear it.
But there's a lot of movies like that. Not only in comic books, you have the Avengers, Thunderbolts, the Eternals, the Justice League, the Suicide Squad, and even outside of comic books, there's movies like The Fast and Furious and The Expendables and The Losers, where you take these ragtag any heist movie really has this idea too. It's where you take this ragtag group of characters, they each have 11. Kind of a special job or one thing they're super good at. Yeah, Oceans, that's another good one. And they come together for a common goal, whether it's to save the world or rescue someone or stop a villain, all of the above. And it's a cool idea. It's always a cool idea, but it doesn't always work. So we're going to talk about the kind of the do's and don'ts, the when it does and when it doesn't of team up movies. So my first thought is more characters equals better movie, yes or no?
Depends.
All right. Why does it depend?
Okay, so here's my linchpin for an ensemble movie. If everyone has the same level of shared responsibility and everyone's ability is contingent on the success of the heist, the defeating, like whatever it is they're trying to achieve, if everyone is integral in that, then yeah, sure, add as many people as you want. Where I've seen it is sort of like, well, there's one who sort of makes it happen and everybody else is sort of just there.
Okay.
So it really depends on what are you trying to achieve, and is everybody important to doing that? Or is it like, well, 70% of it was done by this character and the other 30 was this. Well, okay, you kind of could have got around that without that other character. You just wanted an ensemble. So I think the responsibility has to be shared. So to your question, more characters? Not necessarily, but if you need them all, you've got to use them all.
Okay, so if you have them all, you need to use them all.
Yes.
I would say that's a fair point. My issue arises now. I love a team up movie. Heist movies are one of my favorite kinds of movies.
Sure.
Team up movies are fun. My issue lies in whether there is not only are all the characters necessary, but do I know all the characters and care about them? So where I think it works in movies like Justice League or the Avengers is I spent previous films getting to know these characters. Now, I obviously I knew who they were before that, but from if we erase that part, I spend time getting to know these characters. So when they come together, it seems more exciting. It seems like, wow, I wonder how these personalities are going to mesh. When you go in cold and they have to take 20 to 30 minutes of a movie giving you a very brief biography of each one of these characters, their abilities, their backstory. Sometimes you don't even get that. And it's like, why do I even care about this person?
Where this happened recently was a Guy Ritchie movie called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yes.
Great concept. I love it. But it was like, all right, let's just info dump and shove why each one of these members is selected. But I have no connection other than their gifting. And even the gifting is like, okay, you know how to shoot, and you know how to shoot, and you know how to shoot. Okay, like, why is the team needed? Mm-hmm. And so I think to both of our points, everybody has to be needed, but you have to connect to each of them. And without that, you just have a bunch of people in a movie doing a thing, and nobody's special, nobody's unique. And I think that's another point of it. It's like, there has to be a uniqueness that goes beyond the other person's talent. Right? Like Thor in the Avengers is completely other from everybody else. Hulk, completely other. And you could make the argument that Tony, Hawkeye, Cap, and Natasha are all human. Where Hulk differentiates is he's got the radiation. Cap is different because he's got the serum. But it's like Tony's brain is totally different from everybody else's. Hawkeye's one of those ones where it's like, okay, you know how to shoot, but like, are you really crucial here? Maybe not. And so like, it has to be unique enough to say you warrant a space on this team. And it's not just shooter number one, shooter number two. Honestly, that's sort of where Infinity War got into it, where it's like, all right, I'm happy that all the heroes are here, but you're all sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So is it necessary? Again, I'll wax poetic a little bit. That one sort of takes it up a notch because that's a bigger threat. And so you need more characters to do that. But at some point, it's like you lose the specialness of each of them.
But you also, like I said, have the benefit of having had so many movies that kind of endeared you to these characters so that when they showed up again, even if you could say, do we really need Wasp and Ant-Man? Do we really need, Black Panther and Shuri, whatever?
The answer is no.
You could say, well, maybe we don't need both of them, but I got so attached to Wasp when I saw her in the previous two movies. And I mean, Black Panther, I saw him in 4 other movies, and what a great character. And I love seeing him, do this stuff. But I think alongside what you were saying is not only do they need to stand apart from each other, but I think they need to be beyond archetypes as well.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just have the smart one, the sexy one, the beefy one, the fighting one, the leader, the second in command. And I mean, like any kind of storytelling, you're going to have archetypes. There. It's like when you say there's stereotypes exist for a reason. It's because
Sure.
we see them so often. But I think that if you want to tell a really compelling story and do something different when you have so many of these movies, that's where it becomes important to move beyond that, or at least be aware that you're doing it. Like be more meta with it then. And like understand that, like, what's your role again on this team? I'm just here to look good. Oh, well, that's fine. Nailed it. Good job.
Well, and I think that's where Avengers did it, right? Like, genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. Like, that line exactly speaks to what you're saying.
Right.
It's like, and what exactly do you do? Well, here's what I do.
Right. Here's all the things I am outside of it. Yeah.
If you can have fun with it, by all means, but don't just, so many of them just fall into the trapping of just, well, you're here because you're here and that's it. So, speak to the role, make sure it's unique, and make sure that people connect to these characters beyond just role number 5.
Well, and this is the problem I think we're going to come up against with Thunderbolts is that the characters that they've chosen, for the most part,
They're all the
are
same.
characters that are not only the same kind of villain or anti-hero or whatever, but it's people we don't really care about. Like, you can make an argument for Winter Soldier, you can make an argument for Yelena, because we've seen them in multiple things and we've seen their stories develop through Hawkeye and Black Widow, or through Winter Soldier and Avengers and all the Captain America stuff. But I think characters like Ghost and Taskmaster and Red Guardian, like, I just don't care.
They were B characters in their own movie where we got introduced to them, so they didn't even get developed there. And now maybe the thought is, yeah, we're going to develop them in these. That way you develop the affinity for them. But other than that, we really are relying on Bucky. And quite honestly, $10 says Zemo shows up. You're relying on the nostalgia of the character through a different IP, but you didn't develop that character there. So now you're hoping that one character will sort of bring us through. At the same time, you're introducing a villain to these villains. Like, it's tricky.
So is anybody, again, because the title is popular, this was a similar problem to, honestly, I think you could argue that it's a problem in both Suicide Squad movies, that it was...
That's not the only problem.
It was... Shush your face. We're not doing that one today, so you shut your mouth. They used a lot of characters that are well loved and well developed in comics, and so it's like, well, we want to put all these guys in there, but when you didn't take the time to develop them, and especially, well, actually in both of them, when you killed a whole bunch of them off, it's like, was I supposed to care? I feel like you wanted me to care, but you didn't give me enough of them to really be like, wow, I can't believe, like, that was high stakes for this movie then. I mean, not really, because they just all seemed like fodder for the more popular characters. So I feel like that's going to happen with Thunderbolts too, is like you have, Bucky and Yelena as your leaders. If, Taskmaster or Red Guardian or US Agent, like, dies in this movie, all right. I mean, I didn't really care much about them anyway. Now, if one of the big ones goes, that might, pull at me a little harder, but...
Yeah, when Ghost dies, I'm not going to feel anything, and we're just going to move on.
And what a shame, because you could have taken the time to develop these characters, even within the movie, to make me care. But then that becomes the problem, is that will then lengthen the movie, and even a really good movie,
still won't care.
A really good movie, 3 hours is a long time just to make me care about a character that you're ready to sacrifice,
Exactly.
And I think so. I think it can work. And I think that the idea is always fun to have these team up movies and have these ensemble movies. But I think that we've done them to the point where it stops being meaningful. And that's unfortunate, because we're wasting really wonderful characters that could be utilized in a different way. if we do it a little differently, you know?
Which perfectly segues into the film of today, which I know I was very cryptic about, but we're covering The League of Extraordinary
A
Gentlemen.
team-up movie. Hooray!
Never done that before. Although this is sort of one of the first of its era.
Well, as far as superhero ones, definitely. And it is based on the seminal comic by Alan Moore, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. You can see how pretty they are on the cover there. And the comic is phenomenal storytelling. The movie, well, we're going to talk about it, but why don't you hit us with that ever so lovely plot synopsis so we can kick into it.
Cue foreboding music.
Do it.
Here we go. In a parallel Victorian Britain, the Phantom decides that world domination isn't going to happen on its own. So he decides to unleash a steampunk apocalypse of global destruction. Enter Alan Quartermain, an experienced adventurer, colonial explorer, and general grumpy old man with a gun. He recruits an absolutely ridiculous team of English literature's most unstable characters because who else is available? Meet the team, a bloodthirsty vampiress who probably won't eat you. Probably. A mysterious secret agent who spends more time lurking than contributing. An ambitious scientist who definitely won't turn into a rage monster. A lonely invisible man, which sounds sad but is mostly just inconvenient for everybody else. A savage beast who doesn't do well under pressure or at parties. And a depressed immortal whose existential dread is his main personality trait. The dysfunctional Victorian Avengers squad must put aside their trust issues, violent tendencies, and varying levels of immorality to stop the Phantom from doing whatever evil thing guys named Phantom do. The world is doomed unless by some miracle the League of mildly cooperative misfits can actually work together without trying to kill, betray, or dramatically monologue at each other first. Can they save the world before it self-destructs? The odds aren't great, but it'll be a glorious mess either way in 2003's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Dun, dun, dun!
Very nicely done. And this ensemble feature, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, stars Sean Connery, Shane West, Peter Wilson, Jason Fleming, Stuart Townsend, is directed by Stephen Norrington, who is also the director of the original Blade movie. So,
Oh, no way.
there you go. 2 comic book movies under his belt. So, yeah.
Any good things in this movie?
Well,
I have very little.
I have almost nothing. I have more, let's put it this way. I have more other than I do good.
Let's go with good first. Get
All
it
right.
out of the way.
All right, so here's kind of like we talked about as far as ensemble movies. I love the idea of this movie.
Yes.
The idea of
Idea's
it is
great.
so cool. Taking these characters from various British literature that are all kind of, timed around the same time period, and bringing them together, having them meet each other, having an adventure together. The idea is super cool. And I also love the steampunk aesthetic. I've always been
It's really cool.
and I honestly wish they had leaned more heavily into it. This isn't a bad thing, but I wouldn't have hated if they leaned heavier into the steampunk aesthetic and really just went
The
for it.
problem with steampunk is that you have to love it to appreciate it. And because this is more the let's dip our toe into this, I like that it was steampunk light, where it put you in the world enough, but it wasn't overdone to where it became the detractor.
Right.
And
And
so I felt like it was a good balance.
and it made it more accessible for people that may not be familiar with the idea of steampunk. This may have, sparked them to be like, ooh, I want to hear more about this alternate history. So that makes sense. I just, as a fan of it, I wouldn't have hated more of it.
Yep.
Victorian London, I love the setting. I love Victorian
great.
London. As I said in a previous episode, I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes and a lot of the stories that these characters that we see in the movie are from. And so that setting is always works for me. The Phantom, I think, is good and bad, but one of the things I appreciated is that the Phantom is kind of two characters. The Phantom spelled Fantome, the French Phantom is
The French sneaking in again.
yeah, they're always around.
Unreal.
In the original French Phantom stories, the Phantom is a gentleman thief. And
that's cool.
he's the greatest criminal mind of France, and he's like kind of the bad guy that you root for in those stories. But there's also allusions to him being the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
As well. And they even say, Sean Connery has that line where it's like, oh, Phantom, operatic. So, there were allusions, and I kind of wish they had made him Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, they did. Again, they leaned into it a bit with the mask and the scarring and that kind of thing. But I think
here's a challenge. Anytime either of us are referring to Sir Connery, we have to do the accent.
Just referring to him or quoting one of his lines.
If it's under his umbrella, it's gotta be done.
Okay, so if I say he was really excellent in this movie, it has to be he was really excellent in this movie.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. I liked the relationship between Nemo and Mr. Hyde towards the end of the movie. I feel like there was something there that could have developed more, but it seemed like kind of a fun little buddy, like I wouldn't mind a buddy cop of Nemo and Jekyll and Hyde doing their own little side quest.
Cop. Yeah.
And look, the movie is fun. If bad, it's a bad movie, but it's a lot of fun. Like you have a good time watching it, and for all its flaws, surprisingly, it has pretty good pacing.
What flaws? There's no flaws.
I got pages of flaws. But
we'll get there.
It's pretty good pacing, I would say. There's not a whole lot of downtime.
It moves. It pauses where it needs to, but it's well paced.
The exposition isn't so egregious that it's like, oh my God, stop talking and get to the action. Yeah. So, but that is it.
Yeah. I have like 3 other things. I felt like the actors, given what they were doing at the time, to pull them in were great choices for this ensemble, right? Like it wasn't just the top peak actors of the day all pulled into the biggest budget movie of the time.
Yeah.
It was like you pulled random people who were doing really unique things in at their moment. But it wasn't just Tom Cruise and Johnny Depp and Javier Bardem and, Kate Beckinsale. And, like they pulled some not deep cuts, but they were all doing something good in their corner. And then when you brought that in, it became something really cool to sort of like look back now 20 something years later and say, oh, that was a cool time in cinema. And look what everybody else was doing at the time.
Right, because it was these weren't people you would expect to see in a science fiction adventure superhero kind of movie like this, and so to let them kind of stretch their limbs a little bit, doing something different. Yeah,
I love that this was Connery's last film.
I have that in other. Yeah,
I love it. I think it's awesome.
But it was his last film because it was so bad. Because the set apparently was a very not a great experience.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was issues where like they wanted, a prop didn't work, so there was 2 days delay because it didn't work, and then it didn't look right on the screen how they wanted it to, and like all these different things that were like, listen, I don't know that anybody's going to look at that guy's gun that closely that it matters. So he didn't have a great experience working on it. So that was why.
Yeah, makes sense. The last good thing that I love in this movie is that it's a Christmas movie because there was snow in it.
Okay. Listen. That's not what makes it a Christmas movie. There was snow because they were in I don't know, Antarctica or wherever the Phantom's Siberia, whatever, wherever the Phantom's thing was.
What, the Phantom?
It's exactly what the Phantom.
That's all my good.
That's fair.
That's fair.
Since our good was so short, why don't we hit some other? If you do you have any other?
Just one.
All right, so let's hit some other, and then we'll go to a break. So hit me with your one.
It's just clear to me that Joss Whedon saw and liked this movie, because this is shot for shot, beat for beat Avengers. If you think about it, you could copy and paste a lot of this.
Yeah.
The dialogue, the beast character, the supernatural element, the smart one, the leader, the villain who's actually a good guy but a bad guy, the betrayal. Like, it's the Avengers story, which is fine. I think Avengers probably did it better. My affinity is more for this because I think this is a cooler idea. But I just didn't know what to do with that. As I was like halfway through, I'm like, is this Avengers because I've seen Avengers so many times and there's familiar beats, or did he just copy paste? And I think it's the latter.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see how a lot of the beats are familiar in that regard.
Yeah. That's all.
So my others, so not only was there issues with Sean Connery, but Alan Moore famously hated this movie so much that he removed his name from any future adaptations of his work. So if you watch V for Vendetta, From Hell, Watchmen, the series and the film, Alan Moore, you won't have Alan Moore is not credited on it because he said, look, I don't want anything to do with what they're doing with my books. My books will stand alone, and however you decide you're going to butcher them, I don't want to be attached to it.
Does he get royalties from it at least?
I mean, probably. I would imagine because, like, contractually, he created these characters or created
he's got the
idea or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would imagine he gets royalties from it, but he didn't want anybody to look on the screen and be like, "Oh, this is an Alan Moore thing." No, yeah. Don't give me credit for that.
No, don't want that.
There was some foreshadowing that they never really laid into. When you first see the Phantom, you see his fist and he's wearing a Freemason ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the League has their first meetup, the doors have the Freemason logo on it.
And they never paid that off.
So it was foreshadowing as to the fact that the Phantom is probably M. But there was never any, like, now, again, the end of the movie kind of gave you the impression that they wanted to make at least a sequel. So maybe the idea was to pay that off down the line, but I thought that was interesting. The last other I have is also something I really liked, because this is a movie where all the characters are from different books and different pieces of literature. They made references to additional pieces of literature, such as The Murder in the Rue Morgue.
This is all in my bad.
Oh,
I don't know
really?
I don't know how you make this other. This is bad.
Because it wasn't great, but I liked, Mr. Hyde has been terrorizing the Rue Morgue. Call me Ishmael from Moby Dick.
The Phineas Fogg reference.
Phineas Fogg and the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper. Yeah,
I liked all that.
I like it, but they don't, those aren't main characters. So you spend more time. But you spend more time making literary references just to say, haha, we know how to read books. Spend the time developing the characters that we're looking at.
But it gave you time. It gave you more references to the world that we're living in. And again, I think that if there had been additional movies, this something like that could have paid off.
I hated it.
Oh, I actually
hated it. And they actually take it another step further, which is another bad thing I have, but I'll save it.
All right. Well, I didn't want to put it in good because I don't know if I don't know that it helped the movie, but I appreciated it because, like that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when he's like, hey.
Hey.
Whoop. Here I come. Oh.
That's what I liked doing, where it was like, Rue Morgue. Yeah, I know that one. I have Brown World
Captain
80
America.
Days. Knew that one. Call me Ishmael.
I understood
Knew
that
one.
reference.
Do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
Exactly. I understood that reference.
Why don't we take a break, hit the ad, and we'll be back in a minute.
Have you ever wanted to make more of yourself? Well, why go to the gym when you can take Dr. Jekyll's Performance Enhancer? By using our secret patented formula, you can channel your dark side and become an ape-like rage monster. Top hat not included. Be sure to check out our original and all-new flavors, Marvel, Helsing, and Pagemaster. Dr. Jekyll's Performance Enhancer is, however, not responsible for the development of dual personalities, hallucinations, or recruitment into shady government agencies. Call now and receive your free stolen sample and tell him Dorian Gray sent you. Dr. Jekyll's Performance Enhancer, where waking up on the wrong side of the bed has a whole new meaning.
What did you say? Stole sample?
Your free stolen sample and tell
Stolen.
him Dorian Gray sent you.
There it
Now,
is.
I don't know if I'll explain it to you, but you can edit all this part out. The flavors of Marvel, Helsing, and Pagemaster.
No, I got it.
Okay. All right, good.
I
I don't
got
know how many people will get the other appearances of Mr. Hyde.
Let's keep it in for our audience. Where else does Mr. Hyde show up?
Where indeed?
No, I'm asking.
You're asking me. Oh, I thought you were telling.
Educate the fans, bro.
Oh, okay. So Mr. Hyde is also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There is a Marvel villain named Mr. Hyde. Mr. Hyde is also in the Van Helsing movie around the same time as this with Hugh Jackman in the very beginning, another version of him. And he also makes an appearance in another story literature type movie from the 90s called The Pagemaster with Macaulay Culkin. One of the first people he meets is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
He also shows up in Tom Cruise's Dark Universe flop.
Oh, that's right. Well, you don't
Russell
see Mr.
Crowe
Hyde.
shows
You
up.
only see Dr. Jekyll.
You get Hyde for a minute.
Oh, do you? Oh, I don't see. That's how memorable it was. But
Yeah, which I love, and I love too. I've always thought like it's such a good book. It's such a good novel. We need a good movie version of it. I think Chris Evans is attached to some development of the concept.
I wouldn't hate it. We need a new version of it. I think would be cool. We need a new version of it that's a little more accurate and a little more believable. I have
Yeah.
some issues with almost all of the portrayals of Mr. Hyde.
Well,
But
speaking of issues, I'm going to kick off some bad stuff. And the first capital sin of this movie for me is Tom Sawyer.
that's yeah.
I hate him. He makes 0 sense. Why is he in London?
So I looked up why he's in this movie, and it was because
Because A Walk to Remember came out in 2002.
Well, but the studio was worried that because they had all British actors in a movie taking place in Victorian London with all British literature characters, they wanted an American element. And
Americans
so that's why they put Tom Sawyer in. But his age didn't make sense because of the time period. Why is he a Secret Service, some kind of Secret Service agent? Also, why doesn't he have a Southern accent?
Yep. Well, he sort of does, but Shane West isn't good at that. And the timing thing is the biggest sin, right? Like this book was written in 1876 and it takes place in 1845, which would make him 12. But the movie takes place in 1899, which would make him 66.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And, he did some detective work. But that would be, but like if we took him for the literary time capsule that it should have been, it would be like adding a Stranger Things character to the CIA. Nobody would do it.
It's because they needed an American element for American audiences, which is stupid, and also because story-wise they needed to give Quatermain a
protege.
A protege, and needed him to be a mentor to some degree. So that was why.
Speaking of which, nobody knows what a car is, but Tom Sawyer can drive one.
Okay, that's a big issue. Not only Nemo introduces it as an automobile. and yet they call it a car. He says, "Do you want to go for a spin?" Which is a very modern,
Or at least a 20s term, a
and knows how to
1920s term.
and knows how to drive it. Ridiculous.
We say boo to that.
Also, it has six wheel. It has six wheels, which aesthetically looks cool, but does not make sense as far as what he did with that vehicle.
Oh yeah, he's riding around like it's the Indy 500.
Yeah, six wheels would not. That doesn't make any sense.
The special effects aren't great. They don't hold up. There's a lot of green screen that looks very 2003, and I think in my modern sensibility, I said, "Oh well, it's 2003." Sorry, Return of the King was the same year.
Yeah,
and that thing holds up flawlessly. So it's clear to me that the budget went to Sir Connery, but it's it's such a heavy reliant CGI movie that if the budget had to go to actors, then do things that don't require CGI. And they didn't do that.
I think the water was the biggest thing for me. When the Nautilus explodes and the water rushes in, I hated the way that looked. It just looked so bad.
I think it's the same year, actually. I'll fact check myself. But do you remember the Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow movie, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah.
That movie has the same level of garbage CGI, but I characterized that way worse than this. And now watching it today, it was sort of like, it's sort of the same.
I think fact check yourself, because I think that came out a little later, because they were doing that has a very similar look to movies like Sucker Punch, Sin City, The Spirit. It's when they were doing that kind of.
It's the year after. So that was 2004.
Okay. So that was right around when they were trying to, create all these movies that have this very similar look to them, even though they're not connected.
I felt like this movie would have been better as animation.
Oh, 100%. It would have
looked better.
Dude, if they released an animated version of this, I am first in line. That would be great.
This would be great. I sort of, maybe this is an other, but I put it in bad. Why do they need to create the team? Like, I get that you're trying to get the DNA and all the little special powers and you're trying to do all that, but create the team to stop me, but then fight me and then join me, but battle me. Just capture them individually. From an evil villain standpoint, your plan makes no sense.
Well, to be fair, I think
Don't be fair.
Well, I think they probably tried to do that, because remember those soldiers came in the beginning and shot the fake Quartermain. So
that was another thing I had issue with.
I think the idea was to capture him, and then it was like, okay, these people are a little tougher than we thought. Maybe we need to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, but that doesn't work, because the guy came in, I'm looking for your help, and then the other guys came in and just destroyed everybody.
Oh, that's true. I guess that was just to right. I forgot But
also, back to Nigel. Justice for Nigel. This guy makes a living by telling the stories of Alan Quartermain. Mm-hmm. So that Alan Quartermain doesn't have to tell the stories and regale himself with all his adventures, right?
Yep.
2 seconds in. But do I need the Empire? Why do you need Nigel if you're just going to interrupt and be like, I'll take it from here? What?
Well, because the idea, I think it was that he clearly wasn't just a story seeker. This was somebody from the government looking to hire him. So
this is the first time that's ever happened?
Yeah.
Stupid. Let's talk about Mr. Hyde. It's not bad. It's just odd. Again, with the two of them, there's a literary shoving of two different stories, right? They mix the stories of Robert Louis Stevenson and Edgar Allan Poe. Mm-hmm. And that was the reference. To me, it's like pick one and just be true to that version instead of just trying to showcase that you know how to read.
See, I hate not only the design of Mr. Hyde, I hate, but I also don't like that there's this communication between them, like Bruce Banner and the Hulk.
I actually liked that.
But okay, but it's an inaccurate portrayal of that character. That was never.
But is it accurate to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? Do they do it in the comic? I'm asking.
A little, but not enough to warrant this.
Okay.
They really leaned heavily into that idea here, and I don't like that. I also don't like the transformation.
No, there was a lot of time spent on showing us that they know how to use practical effects and makeup. It's like, all right, but yeah, it had nothing to do. Like, that's why I like the Russell Crowe version of Hyde. I know it's the most recent in 2017, but he's still him, just with a little bit more of a deranged look in his face.
Mm.
And I think that's the point of the literary work, is that, like, you can't differentiate between the two of them because they're sort of the same body.
Yeah.
This is like night and day. This is more Hulk and Banner.
Yes, very much. Which is what makes the when the soldier or whatever takes so much extra potion at the end.
It's like, oh, Abomination.
Makes that even more ridiculous.
Yep.
That he would grow into
Stupid.
that giant rage monster.
The whole plot reveal to the League from Moriarty is stupid. It's info dumping.
Yeah.
Just in case the audience hasn't put it together. That's all it is. You'd never do that. Again, like, the things he does, the cat and mouse game he plays with the League would just be asinine from a villain standpoint. It's like, you'd never do that. You would be calculated, you would be quick, you would be thorough, and you would be specific. You would not be doing this.
Well, especially, again, this is you're changing the character from its literary source. Moriarty was never about the game. He was the Napoleon of crime. He was a criminal genius.
Yes.
He went toe to toe with Sherlock Holmes. So there was no reason to make him your standard. He is thinks he's smarter than everyone else in the room because he is, and you did not get that. You didn't get that.
Thinking about it right now, I feel like if you were going to use Moriarty, you sort of had to have Sherlock on the team. Like, because unless you're really familiar that that's the main villain of Sherlock Holmes, it's like, well, M stands for Moriarty. Yeah, well, B stands for Big Bird. Like, who cares, right? There's no connection.
Well, the reason that they didn't, and so again, that makes sense if you don't know this, but when Quartermain, reveals that he's Moriarty, and he says, that man died at Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah.
That was also when Sherlock Holmes died and
Right.
disappeared for 3 years. So this may have fallen in that time frame of when Sherlock Holmes was still, dead. And Moriarty was obviously not going by Moriarty because he died, and so he was going by the Phantom and M instead.
I suppose.
But they also give that reveal so quick because
really quickly
you have the Mason rings. He also says, "Run, James!" And like if you think about the time period, who's involved, all that stuff, you can kind of put that together if you're, the slightest bit familiar with this kind of world.
Yep. Last two things. Nemo surviving bullets is ridiculous. They're like stormtroopers at this point.
Mm.
He's just flipping through and everything's fine. Give me a break.
Yeah.
And the other give me a break is Quartermain dying from a stab in the back. He's Quartermain.
Well,
you mean to tell me that he just gave up because Shane West got a lucky shot?
That didn't seem
not.
Yeah, that did not seem like a fatal wound. It would have been different again if he was stabbed in the chest or the stomach. But also, Africa would never let him die, that whole thing. So, I don't think he was going to stay dead in, the hope of a sequel. All right, that's it.
That's it.
All right, so I agreed with some of your stuff there. Again, I like just harping on, they kind of watered down these characters and they made them very inconsistent. And obvious, Dorian Gray. It's like, oh, there's a painting missing from your wall. Okay, we get it. We know the story. Oh, here's
also that painting does not fit that space.
No, it doesn't. So I don't know,
No.
what did Moriarty reframe it while he had it in his possession? This would look nicer
Stupid.
in this ornate frame. Mina Harker, her vampirism is so inconsistent. So she can feed and turn, vampire and scary looking, but she doesn't need to feed on blood to survive. It's only when she's like fighting somebody.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
Also, she just turns into a swarm of bats. Like Dracula was able to turn into a bat, but why does she turn into a swarm of them? That doesn't make any sense.
Right, and like them being the cover for her, but like no bats actually die from the bullets that they're protecting the car from.
Yeah, so they're supernatural bats.
What are we doing?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
It's a what the flip moment all over again.
Let's talk about the Nautilus. The Nautilus was not a good design. Now, it looked very cool, but not only was it not consistent with the way it's described in the book, but that is the Titanic.
Yeah.
Under the water. Even the limited amount of things they would have had in that time period, as in regards to detecting things in the water, they would have been able to see that thing coming. And if he was a pirate and an explorer, stealth was not like this was a cruise liner. Like everybody had giant quarters that they stayed in. There was hundreds of thousands of workers. It was just
To this, I say no.
yes. To I say a big fat no. Yeah, Mr. I mean, I already said that Mr. Hyde's formula doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
Skinner's makeup, the
I liked it.
no, I like how it looks, but it it inconsistently made sense. So like you see him when you first meet him and he's like putting it on, but then all of a sudden his face and whole head is perfectly covered with not a thing missing. I think it would have been better if he consistently just like did a little on his face so that you knew where he was.
Yeah. Well, also, sometimes you can see water in him or liquid, and other times you can't. It's like, well, wait, what are the rules here?
Yeah. Well, when they attack, when they're all in Dorian's house and he like throws the drink in his face to make the makeup run off him or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, man, that is some really weak makeup that all you have to do is I hope you don't go out in the rain in that makeup.
Is this flour? Is it pomade? Is it paint? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Is it cream? Who knows? That would have been a good ad.
The
Invisible Man
Invisible Man cream. Yeah, that would have been a good one too. They're very glib about the bar in Africa exploding and a couple of people, including the bartender, dying.
Don't worry. Don't worry about it. None of them are main characters.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I mean, Quartermain seemed real unconcerned that he just lost
real broken up there.
Some friends and things like that.
But he got his gun, so he's okay.
He got his gun, and that's what matters. Which didn't even matter because Sawyer gives him a cooler gun later.
Yep.
So the dialogue's so bad, so much of it so bad. Moriarty explaining his evil plan on a record. Why would you have given them time? Again, you're an evil genius. Why would you have given them time to deal with the bombs? Like if you would just let it happen, then they would have been caught completely unaware, and you probably would have succeeded. Like, why?
Listen to this song. I don't need to explain things to you.
It was so just problematic, I think.
And you could say he's an egomaniac who just, is so self-absorbed that he needs to monologue himself. But it's like, I didn't connect to that.
He was, but that's not consistent with the character.
Well, and it's not consistent with the fact that he's trying to be the Phantom as well. Mm-hmm. So what you tried to balance, you actually failed completely because I didn't connect to either one.
I agree. That's a problem. My biggest problem and the last thing, Well, two things. One wasn't bad, but the ending, they were clearly planning for a sequel. They all
They
left with
wanted it so
Nemo.
bad.
The witch doctor is doing his thing, and then the ground
The
starts to
sand sort of
shake. So
moves.
clearly, they
Yeah.
were gunning for a sequel. The movie was style over substance,
Yes.
100%. Now we need to talk about Mr. Connery.
Why?
Not him, not the actor, but the inclusion of Alan Quatermain. Now I know that they were basing this on the graphic novel, which had Quatermain. By the way, also Quatermain and Mina are lovers in the comic, not Dorian
Ooh.
and Mina or Sawyer and Mina. So just throwing that out there. Um, you made the leader of the team someone that is unlikely to have been heard of by the general audience. Most people in school, you would have in school you read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, so you'd know who that is. Mina Harker, she makes allusions to Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde, pretty pop culture savvy. Even Moriarty and the Invisible Man. Those are all pretty well-known characters, but the leader of your team is Alan Quatermain, who, if you don't know who that is, seems like a weird choice. It's like, so this is just what, like a super old Indiana Jones?
Sort of.
Kind of.
And what's interesting that you're bringing out is like you just went down the litany of all the members. Every one of them has a skill, but it's their dark side that they wrestle with, that they struggle with. Quatermain doesn't have one. And so it would have been really cool to have somebody who's got the demon in the bottle, so to speak, to pull from Iron Man, to say, I've got this struggle, but I have to lead the team, and I don't want to tell them what it is. I don't want to reveal. I don't want them to look at me differently. Can I actually do it? He doesn't have any of that, and therefore you're more drawn to the complex character, but Quatermain, not only is he not known, he has no complexity to him. And so we're basing all of this off of, old James Bond, and it falls flat. And you're absolutely right.
I don't know who would have been. I would have to do some research to, see if I think there would be a suitable replacement. And he works if you don't think too hard about it, but in regards to you didn't take the time in this movie to give real backstory to any of these characters, so you're using a character that I would say most of the people that would have gone to see this movie would not be familiar with and would have just said, so this is like Indiana Jones pretty much, or the librarian or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what he is. There's a lot more to the story, but I also think it wouldn't have worked to have Sherlock Holmes be the leader. I don't think that would have worked. He doesn't play well with others.
No, you change any of them and it becomes their story, right? Because in my head I'm like, well, throw Dracula in there. Well, now it's a Dracula,
and then
story.
it becomes a battle of egos, which is not the story they were trying to tell. You needed a clear cut leader, the seasoned. The seasoned
and
person.
Quite frankly, that's why 22 years have gone by and there hasn't been a reboot. They don't know what to do with it.
If DC did an animated version of it, like they just did if they did it in the style that they did with Watchmen and with Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they made it, a two-parter, told a big long story, man, that would be so good. It could be so good.
It can, and I think that's why it's got such an affinity for me. It's like when I saw it, I loved it. It's got a great concept, and it's got such good potential. They just can't execute.
When I saw it, I loved it. I really did. I've seen
Greatest movie. I think I watched it 7 times in a summer.
I've seen it a bunch of times. And that, we're kind of falling into my my rating, but
well, fall into some spiritual content, why don't you?
Let's do that instead. So my spiritual content is kind of focused on the idea of mostly Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll. Could be you this could be true of kind of all the characters that we, grow to know over the course of the movie, but most of them, and it's the idea of letting your sin nature take control and overcoming temptation. You see in this movie that Dr. Jekyll struggles when he's Mr. Hyde because he knows that Mr. Hyde does really terrible things. He's violent, he's evil, he has this appetite for destruction, and he wants to be better than that. He argues with him and he says, I'm a good man, I'm a good man. And Hyde is telling him, like, she'd never look at you like that, and you want her and you can't have her. You should be leading this team, you should do all these things. And a lot of times that's what our inner self tells us, is to let our darker side take control of situations where we're struggling. Revenge is so much easier, greed is so much easier. There's the easy way, and then there's the right way. The easy way is almost always the darker path. When we begin to take control over those emotions and trust in God's grace and trust in God's guidance, we're able to start overcoming that darkness, because when we choose to be followers of Christ, more is expected of us. So if you equate that to Dr. Jekyll as well, there's this big calling. We want you to be a part of this team. We want you to stop this great evil that's going to bring destruction to the world. I can do that as Dr. Jekyll. I don't need Hyde to do that. I'm in control, because more was expected of him. He was expected to do this great thing. We're called to a higher standard when we follow Christ. We're called to lead with our good intentions, to lead with our good side. And we fail at that so much, and we let our darker side kind of come out and drive the train for a while. And it's hard to not do that, because sometimes that is easier. It takes the pain away. But when we're called to do more and to be more, we need to make sure that what's driving the train or what's driving the Nautilus is those good intentions, that trust in the guidance of God, trust in the idea of turning the other cheek, trusting in the idea of forgiveness, and resisting the easy way of handling things.
It's really good. I like
Thank
it.
you.
Mine's a little different. There's a line from Dorian where he says, "I've lived long enough to see the future become history. Empires crumble, there are no exceptions." I love that line because
That's a good line.
it was very sobering, but it was also peaceful. That time sort of reveals what we can't see in the moment. That looking back often gives you a perspective that you don't have in the moment. And I often live, probably very similar to you and a lot of our audience, I live moment to moment. I rarely stop and reflect back. And if I do, it's because I've hit a tough time. But over time, you realize that the things you're stressing about in the moment, with the benefit of hindsight, they don't kill you as much. The failures don't seem as devastating. They become lessons. The plans that we were so sure of that unravel, we see, God was still there working through it all. And the verse that popped up was Ecclesiastes 3, "For everything there is a season, and there's a time for every matter under heaven." And I just really embodied that idea of hindsight, that we get the privilege as a species, as a creation, to look back and learn, to say, there's a part of me that can't just keep going. I have to stop. I have to pause. I have to look back and use time as my ally, not as this thing I'm running out of, although we are running out of it. There's a benefit to being able to look back, and instead of just chasing, going, to look back and to say, here's where God was. Here's where I failed. Here's where I can improve. Here's the lessons that I learned. And from those observations, now I can live wisely. I can gain perspective. I can grow in wisdom. And so the question that I was asking myself is, like, am I using my past experiences to shape how I trust God now, instead of just constantly going and going and going?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really good. really good. And you seem to refrain from saying it, but it's the idea of hindsight being 2020.
It is. I can't say 2020 anymore just because of COVID.
Oh, yeah,
I've said it enough for a lifetime. I don't want to say it anymore.
Just start saying
That
COVID year.
It's referred to as that year.
The year. You know the one.
You know
the one we're talking about here.
Speaking of that year, let's review and rate that movie. What'd you think?
Look, I said under my good stuff, this is fun, if not bad. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good time. For me, this is an Adam West.
Oh.
It's so bad, but it's a lot of fun. So it's so bad that it's good. You're not going to watch this or even show it to somebody and say, "Man, you want to see a great comic book movie or you want to see a great piece of cinema?" No, but you're going to be like, "Listen, do you want to be entertained for 2 hours? Do you want to laugh at some of the ridiculous things that go on?" This is a good movie for that. So it's an Adam West all day.
Understood. Disagree, but understood.
You can disagree and be wrong, but go for it. What do you got?
I went a bit higher. I gave it an Affleck.
That's way higher than I would have expected. Okay.
Because it's fun, it's campy, it's a great idea. The nostalgia is through the roof for me. Yeah, it's bad, but it's not so bad it's good. It has some value. You can look back and say, terribly executed, but for what it is and the fact that they've never resurrected it, it has to stand alone. And so for that, I gave it an Affleck.
All right. Well, I don't know that I would, I don't know that I could go that high, but I understand. But again, nostalgia, I think with some of these movies that we do, especially some of these older ones, nostalgia is going to be a big part because again, we talked about it. That was all we had for a long time until we got, the huge surge of comic book movies, every other month. So
totally.
It makes sense.
But audience, what did you think? Did you like this movie? Do you like books? Because they like books.
Clearly, these guys love books.
Give us your thoughts in the comments on YouTube, Instagram, and the Book of Faces. We'd love to hear your thoughts about what a great movie this is.
The Book of Faces.
Do you like that one?
The Book of Faces. That actually sounds like the adventure they could go on in the sequel to hunt down the Book of Faces.
Ooh, that would be interesting. But that wraps up this episode of Sanctum Sanctorum Podcast.
It does. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed us talking about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. If you want more of the League, I highly recommend you check out the graphic novels by Alan Moore. They are an excellent read. Just don't be too shocked when Quartermain and Mina have a little intimate moment because it could be jarring.
Like,
Although, she's just as old as him.
True.
She's been around a long, long time. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we'll see you on all the socials and in the interwebs. And to close us out, remember, kids, an old tiger may sense the end, but Sean Connery knows when to sense the end of his career. And it was this one. So we'll see you next time.
That's mean.
It was mean.
Is it bad because he's a bad actor or he was given a garbage script? That's what you have to toe the line on.
Well, no, he actually wasn't bad in the movie itself. I think actually he's a very good choice to play Alan Quartermain. But again, he worked with what he was given. This, to me, is very much like Michael Caine, where, you could put Michael Caine, pick whatever you think is the worst movie ever. And if you put Michael Caine in it, you may still say this is a terrible movie. But Michael Caine was great.
Michael Caine,
yes. I feel like Sean Connery is like that
on this show.
You put him in the worst movie you can think of, but he's always enjoyable in it.
He's something.
He's in it. He's sure in it.